My question is for Tush James. Will you apologize to President Trump for wasting millions of dollars and the state of New York for a witch trial? And how does it feel to know that you will be in prison for mortgage fraud?
Letitia James is another one that belongs in jail. Look, Letitia James, Fonnie Willis in Georgia, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. The question is, how coordinated were they?
It's a summary of a gruesome assault on Donald Trump citizen, Donald Trump candidate, Donald Trump president. Disgusting at every level. And think about this. How the justice system was used by the Biden regime, by local Democrat DAs. Appalling. Absolutely appalling. But justice in the end. Donald Trump's president of the United States, a great, great president, and they couldn't stop him, and they won't be able to stop him today. Do you realize I went back and looked? There are now 334 lower court cases, pieces of litigation brought against Trump and his administration over his policies. 334 cases, most of which have been either overturned or stayed or vacated by the circuit courts. Not all, but most. And that's still underway. That's how diabolical these people on the left are and the Democrat Party is.
To court watchers like us, that this was how this case was going to come out. Anybody who watched the argument before the First Department saw that this panel of judges was not sympathetic to Tish James. We've got a montage of questions. This is not Tish James arguing here. It's her deputy, Judith Avail. And as soon as she got up to the lectern, she had a hot bench, lots of questions, and none of them was particularly favorable toward her and Tish James's position. You're going to see this montage. I want the audience to know only the first judge who you will hear was appointed by a Republican. All the other judges on this court were appointed by Democrats. So this is a Democrat court that just found in favor of Donald Trump. But here's how the oral argument went a couple months ago, September of 24.
May it please the court, Judith Vail for the New York Attorney General's office. All of the defendants repeatedly violated— Ms.
Vail, can you identify any previous case in which the Attorney General sued under Executive Law 6312 to upset a private business transaction that was between equally sophisticated partners, where the supposed victim had the ability and legal obligation to discover the allegedly misrepresented matters by conducting its own due diligence, where the supposed wrongdoer advised the supposed victim through written disclaimers to conduct its own due diligence and to draw its own conclusions, where the alleged misrepresentation almost entirely concerned inherently subjective valuations of properties and businesses.
Yes.
And where the victim never complained about any fraud in the transactional losses from it. Because I've gone through the cases which you've cited, and all of them always involved a consumer protection aspect. It involved protection of the market, which is what you have here. I mean, you've got two really sophisticated parties in which no one lost any money. And that was the point of my initial question. Every case that you cite involved where there was damage to consumers, damage to the marketplace. You've got a scheme to get unsophisticated consumers to take out home loans. You got a collapse of Lehman Brothers. You don't have anything like that here.
I think you hear underneath all these questions, the question of mission creep. Has 6312 morphed into something that it was not meant to do? And that's something you must address, because there has to be some limitation on what the Attorney General can do in interfering in these private transactions, as Justice Friedman said, that where people don't claim harm. So what is the limiting principle? I have a question that's similar to Judge Rosato's, actually, which is the immense penalty in this case is troubling. So how do you tether the amount that was assessed by Supreme Court to the harm that was caused here, where the parties left these transactions happy about how things went down?
Historical backdrop to this law, how do we draw a line, or at least put up some guardrails to know when the AG is operating well within her admittedly broad sphere of 6312, and when she is going into an area that wasn't intended for her jurisdiction.
Watching this assistant prosecutor from the AG's office make this ridiculous argument to the appeals court, talking about fraud and disgorgement of ill-gotten gains, when there was no actual fraud. Nobody was defrauded of a damn thing. There was not one nickel that was defrauded from any of these lenders. And so the whole thing is just built on a house of cards. Engeron, I think, has some responsibility here too, because if you're the judge and the trial judge, you're supposed to make sure that this kind of farce doesn't happen in your courtroom, but he allowed it and he was a part of it. And so what I want to know is why we are allowing these judges like this and prosecutors like this to stay involved in these cases. When Tish James goes out and makes all of these public comments about how she is focusing her efforts specifically on one individual that she is targeting for political reasons, how is that prosecutor allowed by the judge to remain on the case? In a rational world, in a rational legal world, a trial judge would not allow either of these prosecutors to stay in the case. A simple motion saying, look, judge, this is what she has said publicly about my client. She's targeting my client. And in a criminal context, if you're talking about, targeted malicious prosecution, that's one thing. It's the same principle over in the civil case. You can't just use the awesome power of the state to target and prosecute specific persons with whom you have a political beef, and it's just so crazy that we're here in August of 2025 having this discussion, because this is like law 101. It's almost like people forgot law that they learned in law school, or they were absent the day they taught law in law school. Engeron needs to be off the bench. He has no business presiding over trials in New York. Letitia James has no business bringing, of all things, mortgage fraud cases now on behalf of the state of New York. These people need to be out of their jobs. They need to be dealt with. They need to be dealt with severely. And honestly, I'm at the point where I don't know that the appeals process is enough. It's not enough to just say, all right, Engeron, you and your $500 million judgment, you're done, no more of that. That's not enough. We need to have an appellate process that can send a message to prosecutors and to judges and say, look, you can't do this. Tish James personally ought to have to reimburse him. It ought to come out of her hide. It ought to come out of her bank account. Whatever she's got left, it ought to bankrupt her the way it could bankrupt.
She's got multiple homes.
If it wasn't Donald Trump, nobody else would have been able to afford to defend themselves in this litigation. So she ought to be on the hook personally, financially, for this type of specious and egregious, malicious prosecution.
Well, first of all, I didn't target her. I know. Yeah. I've been writing about New York City finances and politicians for quite a while, and I ventured onto her. She was just another name on the list. But what I saw was really magnifying red flags I didn't see anywhere else, and that made me look into her deeply. She was spending exorbitantly on her campaigns. She even used private jets on the government's dime that overlapped periods when she was campaign events. And of course, we have the issues of her financial disclosures to New York State and her mortgage situation. But one thing about Abby Lowell, she should get a better lawyer. He's really not that bright. I read his letter to the State Department. It was full of innuendo, and let's put it this way: if Abby Lowell was defending me, I wouldn't be here. I'd still be in prison. 35 years later.
Oh, wow. Tish James, of course, she responded to the allegation. She's saying that she's basically being targeted by President Trump, that this is all part of a revenge plot. Let's take a listen to what she said here.
Let me just say to all New Yorkers and to all Americans, the allegations are baseless. The allegations are nothing more than a revenge tour. And as you mentioned, my office was successful in securing a $454 million judgment against Donald Trump and others for exaggerating the value of his assets.
Let me follow up of some of what's in this letter. It says, according to media reports, which for us in the media is kind of a red flag, meaning that it seems to be based on some social media posts that I know were made by partisan political actors. But just let me ask you about some of the specifics in the letter. they're saying that your house in Brooklyn is a legal 5-family and the mortgage on it is for a 4-family house. Is that true?
So let me just say that, Errol, you know, as any good attorney, I will not litigate this case in a camera. It's important that we will respond to these allegations at the appropriate time and in an appropriate way. But I will not go back and forth with respect to these baseless allegations. I am more focused, again, on standing up for the freedoms, the liberties, and for the rule of law in the state of New York.
Partisan, I'm a registered Democrat. I'm not a partisan political actor. You know, Errol Lewis should know better. I've met him. I actually like him. I've seen him at events where I've demonstrated with the Democrats at City Hall, and this is ridiculous. The reality is partisan political actors did not make Letitia James sign documents that were false over a period of 40 years. Her lawyer says, well, the Trump administration is cherry picking. Well, guess what? You don't have to cherry pick to find a false document that she signed. The only document that I found that was not false was one mortgage on one property, but she should have also disclosed it in her financial disclosures to New York State. This is a slam dunk case, and she can try to wiggle out of it baseless and this and that, this and that. Listen. The documents speak for themselves. The evidence is there.
Right. One of the residences, she said, was her primary residence, so she could get a lower mortgage rate. Reporters have been knocking at the door. The neighbors have never seen her there. I mean, she has been caught red-handed, dead to rights. What do you think about how hypocritical she is? She was out there. She campaigned on getting Trump, saying no one is above the law. She is the top lawyer of New York State. She's not above the law either.
Well, when you're doing crime, you try not to be hypocritical. You try to keep a low profile. Let's put it this way: she'd be a reject for the Crazy Eddie fraud.
Your prediction? Does Big Tish end up in a big orange jumpsuit?
I can't predict the future, but I believe that she will get indicted, and I believe that she will end up getting convicted. Will she end up in jail? I don't know.
Governor Hochul, does she go down with her?
Governor Hochul will probably look to replace Tish James to distance herself from this calamity.
Andrew Cuomo, is he the next mayor of New York City?
Who knows?
Who will you be looking into next?
Wherever my research leads me.
Governor Hochul?
I've looked into Governor Hochul. She spends a lot of money on private jets.
Very interesting.
That's all for today. Thank you. If you want global news to keep you up to date on any new developments, please subscribe our channel and forward our content with your friends on social media and email. Thank you very much for keep supporting me. Stay safe, be blessed. Namaste.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.